and let's continue to worship together.
Right. Well, good morning. Welcome to Hope's Point Baptist Church. And I love the part about adjusting the clock in your car. Jill and I were just doing that with great frustration. Well, she was doing it because she knows I don't have the patience. We would have a broken clock by the time I got through with it. Well, and nearly a half a century of pastoral ministry, I've learned sometimes in advance, sometime in the moment, what people are thinking. Now, I don't mean to sound mystical, it's just the experience of it. So as I came up to preach at the first service this morning, everybody just looked normal, but I knew what they were thinking. You're still here? We have a new pastor, and why are you speaking? And they all nervously like, yeah, you got it. I said, I don't take it personally. And had I not felt an impression from God to offer my services today in this capacity, and in fact, when God really spoke to my heart about doing it, I waited several days before I introduced it to Brother Dale, and I just said, let me run something by you that probably sounds a little weird, and it's going to kind of put people in a little bit of what's happening. And Dale really helped my feelings. He said, yeah, it is a weird idea. I'm not sure about that. I said, well, you can shoot straight as my brother-in-law. But I said, for some reason, and I said, I honestly mean this, and you know my heart. We've been brother-in-laws for 45 years. And I said, I just know, when Jill and I moved from Albuquerque to Indiana to pastor, our kids were 5, 7, and 9. They're like 40, 38, and 36 now. So, but when God impressed us to leave a ministry you've been in for 12 years, it's been so fruitful. It was just, everybody's excited, and I knew God was leading another direction. We loaded up a U-Haul. And we had one vehicle at the time. It was a van. And the goal was I drive the U-Haul, Jill drives the van. And Jill also carries the 3 children and the dog. And we'll get there, you know. And as only timing could be, the night before we were pulling out, someone broke into our van through a side window. And you know, with those custom vans, you just can't go somewhere and get it fixed. All that stuff is customized. And so being the genius fixer-upper of the family, that's why I'm not allowed to fix the radio, I found a good trash bag and some duct tape. And I covered the window. Now, if you remember the summer of 1988, it was like 110 degrees across the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma. Been a long drought. Well, what I didn't realize is the heat on the outside of that car where I put that duct tape, the tape began to melt and run off, and the trash bag started flapping, and then the dog started barking at it. And fortunately, I had no way of knowing this because I'm out in the, no cell phone, no walkie-talkies, and I see Jill flashing the lights, and I'm like, oh, okay. But I found out what was going on that evening. So there was a lot of stress. We look back with a lot of humor now. But at the time, we're moving to a new location. We didn't really know the people. And I had just, I had a 2-week spot from the time after I accepted the pastorate of that church up the road and leaving where I was. And we decided, knowing me and how I operate, I would hit the ground running. And I said, Jill said, we need to go see our parents before we get dug in here. And so I had my father and stepmom in Alabama. I had a mother and stepdad in Illinois, because Gene and Ruth are here. And I tried to work a compromise with her. We're going to see them when we get here. How about that? Didn't work. I just, one of those marriage laws. And so we went to see them. We got back. I really didn't leave enough time. We packed. Thank God we had a missionary in our church. It says, if anybody knows how to put a lot of stuff into a small area, it's a missionary. Brother Sam Keller, he's retired now, but a missionary to Australia. And he jumped in and guided a few of us that did the work, got it all loaded up, and, got up the road. We got in, and I didn't have all the help I thought I was going to have to get moved in. The church was very small then. And so it's Dell and I basically moving in most of the furniture. And I'm telling you, time I hit Sunday morning, I was a zombie. I could have played on the Walking Dead series for that. And I was done, but I had nobody around, and I just said, Jill, we got to do this. And the thought just hit me, and honestly, with true humility, how can I even help Brother Albert's the first Sundays here? So we offered, and he went with it, and so we hope that that's allowed them to bring priority to their move, attention to their family, and I met their three children earlier this morning, and I told them, I'm on your side. I know what it's like. I have three of my own. They still have another brother, Gary, I think it was, right, down in Florida working. But I said, I know what's involved, and I hope this is helpful today. It gives you an opportunity to give priority to home, get around, meet folks, and when us pastors have a message on our mind, we talk to you, but we're tuned in, and we know what we're there to do. So I hope that we'll give some explanation to you what we're up to, and you'll understand even more as we go through. In the old days, many times when a new pastor came to a church, there would be someone, either a guest come in, or if there's someone in the church, that would bring a charge to the church. And the charge simply means, let's outline who we are and what we're up to and how we work in tandem together as new pastor and congregation to move forward in the work of God for the glory of God. And so as I thought about this, I like to play on titles and words, and I thought about the title of the message became Leading the Charge. And you can't see it because our technicians have learned that I give them an outline every week. It's detailed, but they never know where I'm going with it. And I just see them back there sometimes like, out the window, where is this guy? And we've prepared, but always flexible to the leadership of the Holy Spirit. But I always put a graphic in with my title at the head of my notes. And this one is from a 1936 movie. My son, I drive him crazy. Dad, why do you watch those old movies in black and white? They're so corny. And but they just carried a different weight, meaning, of course, from my childhood. But the guy leading the charge is Errol Flynn, and the movie is The Charge of the Light Brigade. And I don't know if it's him or a body double, but he's going over a barricade, and he's got the banner, the flag of their regiment, and it's extended forward, and there's a mass of guys following him. And of course, it didn't end real well for the Charge of the Light Brigade, but they made a sacrifice that paved the way for an ultimate victory for the right side in this situation. And so with that in mind, turn to the book of Exodus chapter 17. I always feel at some point, as I prepare for a message and get ready to present it, it's kind of like the old thing of how do you eat a whale? One bite at a time, and I'm just going to take a bite at a time here, and I'm not exactly sure where all we're going to go. But the premise is that, and you're going to recognize this, life is a series of transitions in our life. It involves changes and challenges and choices that we make along the way. And literally, Hope's Point Baptist Church has been in a transition time for the last 8 months plus. Your pastor of 37 years has retired and gone on, and then there's been this process for the last 8 months of working through bringing to culmination this day that our new pastor and his family are here with us, and they're ready to lead the charge. But that charge is very dependent by the responsiveness of those of us who will follow that charge and his leadership as the new lead pastor of Hopes Point Baptist Church. And because of that, we're not immune as believers. God is anything but boring. And I have found, that was my take on God as a teenager. I believed in God. I went to church somewhat till I went off to college, and I kind of got away from it and all. But the idea was it's just kind of boring. And honestly, since I surrendered my life to Christ at the age of 19 and have followed Him wherever He's led me and done what He's wanted me to do to the best of my ability, it has been an amazing adventure without any boredom. I told somebody a while back, I said, I don't even remember the last time I felt boredom. In fact, at my age the other day, I told Jill, how about 24 hours of boredom? That just sounds good to me. And of course she knew that's not going to happen with me. I'm hyperactive. But our response to this is so important. 4 times leading up, in fact, the first verse of chapter 17, it uses the word journey to describe these series of transitions, these steps, this path that we take with the Lord and one another as His people. In fact, we'll read verse 1 of chapter 17. Then all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of sin. Now, the wilderness of sin was the last stop along the way. If you remember the story, and I can't get into it, I was so proud. They, with amazement, let me know after the service, you finished early. Like, is that unusual? Yeah. So be encouraged. I think we can do that again. But they have left Egypt, and under the direct leadership of God and the delegated leadership of Moses and his assistant Aaron. And when they're leaving Egypt, I look at the Bible a lot of times, and I mean this respectfully and I hope spiritually. I just look at it from different angles than average people do. I'm just kind of weird that way. But when they're leaving, it describes in King James that they left Egypt with a high hand. And I began to imagine as they're pulling out of that 400 or so years of enslavement and bondage and just oppression and depression, they're being set free. And as they're going out, it says they leave with a high hand. One interpretation of that is the Hebrews, they left with boldness, which sounds good. We should be bold as the children of God. But when you really study it, it was kind of an arrogant, in-your-face response. It was kind of like they're high-fiving each other, and they're hand-signaling the Egyptians as they leave, like, in your face, we're out of here. And it was almost like an idea, we have set ourselves free. Well, that got them in trouble immediately. Because as they go out into the wilderness, they run headlong into an impossible situation to get through the Red Sea. So somebody's thinking, well, let's go back a ways and trail around or whatever. And all of a sudden, all of Pharaoh and his army shows up behind them. So to the front is an uncrossable water barrier. Behind them is, it says basically his choice chariots. That would be the, whatever branch of service you were in, that would be the elite forces. I mean, he's brought his best, because I think as they were leaving, despite all that had led him up to releasing them, when they started high-fiving and gesturing toward him and the people in that arrogant way, it incensed him. And so he decided, even against the recommendations of his military and people, just let them go. We're glad to get rid of them. He said, no, get my choice. We're going out. We're going to destroy them. And they were very vulnerable in that transition. And they're spread out in long columns. They weren't men of war. And they probably outnumbered the number of Egyptians coming out. But it was a absolutely no win for the Israelites. And so as a result, in that vulnerability, they're looking at the situation in front, the situation behind, the transition they're in, and they begin to complain to Moses and say, have you just brought us out here to get us all killed? Well, of course, God intervened when Moses cried out, parted the Red Seas. They get across. In chapter 15, they're writing some new praise and worship music. By the way, I really love that last song you did, and appreciate that. He has been so faithful to me and to us. And they're singing the praises of God, the praises of Moses, and everybody is just on a high. And then all of a sudden, they get a little ways out into that wilderness, and they went from too much water to no water. So once again, they begin to complain to Moses. They're ready to kill him, get a new leader, and go back to Egypt. And then God leads them into a place through Moses, and it's called Marah. And all of a sudden, they've got some water to drink, but as they begin to drink it, they begin to spit it out and go, oh, gag, what is that? It was polluted water. So here's another disappointment, another setback. They're ready to turn around and go back. And then God, of course, leads them to Elim. They get a drink. They leave Elim. Then they're back in the way. So you get the picture. Life is continuous transitions. And in those transitions, there are going to be challenges that come in. And we got to admit it. We're creatures of comfort as human beings. And I love what one pastor said a while back. He says, every time we get in a comfort zone, God rezones us. And I want to tell you, I know, and rightfully so, 37 years of an awesome man of God leading this church. You just want it to happen that we all go to heaven together. And but as that transition takes place, God has rezoned us, but I am absolutely convinced that God is about to do something awesome here. And I have worked with your board and the unity, the spirituality. I mean, yeah, I'm not just saying that. I mean, it was a joy to work with them. And meeting Brother Greg and then Mary and now his children. I told, as we left from a prayer meeting, then had a staff meeting afterwards and talked about it, I told Dale, I said, I feel better about this every day. I'm so excited. And I want to be a part of this transition and help and support any way I can for a little while. But as we look at that, there are going to be challenges. We're at a high time right now, and rightfully so. It seemed like an eternity, 8 months. But, you know, the average church takes about 18 months to 2 years statistically to get a new pastor. So you've already had a miracle occur right here. And the way God narrowed it down to this specific man and the way it has all worked out. Folks, I want to tell you something. I'm not just saying it. I mean, you better be tuned in. God's up to something. And I honestly believe, with no disrespect to Brother Ed, he's a dear friend and pastor. It's like when I left my church, everybody, what are we going to do without you? The only pastor we've ever known. You baptized us, you married us, and whatever. And I brought in, and well, I didn't bring in, but we worked with another group that kind of merged with our church. And they were young, but boy, they have done a phenomenal job. And the church has grown, and great things are happening. And I know Brother Ed is blessed by the reality of new leadership, and will be praying. And I just say, tune in. I believe, respectfully, your best days are ahead of you. I really believe that, and I hope you believe it. And I hope you'll believe it even when you hit a Red Sea moment, when you hit a wilderness moment, when you hit a moment the water doesn't taste great. You know, that you understand the commitment to God and His delegated leadership through the journey. And when we stick together, stay together, and move forward together, listen, each point in time, when they got to a good spot, they just wanted to, this is far enough. Canaan's way out there. We can't imagine. They wanted to stay at Elim. It had 12 wells and 70 palms. It was an oasis. But God realized at some point with that many people, they're going to run out of water even with 12 wells. And God said no. So He moves them back and He keeps them. Because the ultimate goal is getting to where God wants us to go. And we know ultimately that is heaven. But we will discover along the way opportunities to serve Him by His grace and for His glory on the way. So there are three things here very quickly that are involved in this. They move in a journey from the wilderness of sin according to the commandment of the Lord. and camped in Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. Here we go again. Are you serious? You know, we act like church is supposedly this idealistic, perfect world. But it's full of imperfect people, including this guy or anybody that leads. But we have a perfect God that when we will work in cooperation with His direct leadership and delegated leadership, we'll get to where God wants us to go. And you'll find out what seem like the greatest test of transitions are the times you'll look back on with the greatest joy. And it's not always the destination, it is the travel along the way. Therefore the people contended with Moses, verse 2, and said, give us some water that we may drink. And I'm sure Moses was thirsty too. So Moses said to them, why do you contend with me? Why do you tempt the Lord? Now Moses had just said the previous chapter, your contention with me is more about your contention with God. And you know this, in a position of leadership, you're just an easy target. If things are great, you really get no credit for it. But the second it goes wrong, it's the leader. So I won't spend long there. Why do you tempt the Lord? And the people thirsted there for water, and the people complained against Moses and said, why is it that you have brought us up out of Egypt? And boy, you talk about over the top. To kill us. What an exaggerated statement. You know, I've always heard that hurt people hurt people. And I have to remind myself as I deal with people who have lots of hurts in their life, you and your quest to help them will somewhat be hurt by their hurt. And you become a target, and you've just got to be strong enough and understand it and move through it. And why have you brought us here to kill us? And our children and all of our cattle. I mean, this is horrible. And first thing I want to go, did you not get a clue at the Red Sea? Did you not get a clue in the wilderness you left? Did you not get a clue at Elam? Catch on here. Being a Christian, following Christ, and pastoral leadership is never about immunizing us from trouble and challenges in our lives. In fact, in some ways it enhances us, because only then, it's like Major Ian Thomas said, we don't know God is all we need until He's all we have. And as we're dependent upon Him and follow Him and His delegated leadership. So what does He do? He cried out to the Lord. Now I'm going to say something that has almost been satirized out there in the media and movies or whatever. Leadership can be a lonely life. And I think in reality, as a pastor, and I say this, and I'm just honest with it, it's a very unique and unusual life. And I know as much as my wife is tuned in with me and served with me, there's times I want to just say, honey, you just don't understand what's going on between me and God right now. And you've got to trust me. I'm trying to follow Him. I'm doing the best for you and the kids. And in your home and the church, it's an unusual and unique life. And there's times, Brother Greg, all you've got is on your face before God saying, Lord, it's like Moses had prayed earlier. These people are ready to stone me. And here he is again, and he's saying that, what shall I do? They're almost ready to stone me. Verse 5, and the Lord said to Moses, I love this. When we talk to God, He talks back to us. You know, prayer isn't just throwing some words out into the heavens and hope they stick somewhere. Prayer is a communication between us and God. It's us pouring out our heart to Him and Him pouring out His grace and mercy to us. And like I said, the last message I preached before this one to you, you can do more than pray, yes. Never make prayer a cop-out. Well, I'll pray about it, Pastor. Well, I'll pray about it, and you never pray. I mean real prayer. You can do more than pray, but you can't do more till you pray. And the prayer breakfast yesterday, prayer we're going to do in a few moments, prayer and these, I'll be honest with you, sometimes I'm human enough, we'd have a 3-hour board meeting and then somebody, let's pray all the way around. And I'd go, seriously? It's 11 o'clock. And then God would rebuke me and says, everything you've said and everything you're going to do is going to be futile if you don't turn it over to me. And prayer is an acknowledgement of our dependence upon God. It's never empty. It's never just an exercise. It engages us with the throne of God, His power and His presence. So the Lord said to Moses, go on before the people. Take with you some of the elders of Israel. Take in your hand your rod with which you struck the river. I could spend a whole sermon on that, but I'll just say the rod originated, I believe, is the staff that Moses carried when he's at the backside of nowhere tending sheep. You remember he asked him, what is that you've got in your hand? And God made that a symbol to him of authority as he represented God to the people. And and the rod is an evidence of the presence and power of God. So you remember his first meeting with Pharaoh, he threw the rod down, it turned into a serpent, you know. And of course, Pharaoh's like, you think that's a big deal? Call my sorcerers and magicians. They came in and they threw their staffs down, whatever they were, magic wands, I don't know. They rode in on unicorns. Well, anyway, they throw them down, and all of a sudden they got a mass of serpents, and they outnumber the serpent of the rod of God and Moses there on the ground. But when you read on in the story, that rod in Moses' hand consumed all those serpents. And we recognize when we represent God, even in a world that opposes us and persecutes us, greater is He that is in us than he that is in the world. And so you're never safer than when you're in the center of God's will and work in your life, no matter what the opposition is around you. So he says, you remember, and the rod was used at strategic points along the way. And he says, take the rod as he struck the river. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. So he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the contentions of the children of Israel, because they tempted the Lord, saying, is the Lord not among us? Now here's the deal. When we have conflict within us, we're most vulnerable to the enemies and conflict around us. And one of the reasons the forces of evil are making so much inroads, and I know this, I've heard it, I've talked to other pastors, I've read it, I've experienced it firsthand. The church is so conflicted. You know, we're in conflict with one another. And it's over some of the most superfluous and silly stuff sometimes. And as a result, our attention and our hearts and everything is engaged, and the world is just encroaching. And we have to come to a place that we're unified under the direct leadership of the Lord, the delegated leadership, and engage the enemy and see the battles won. And so, as they're having this conflict within, here comes conflict from without. Verse 8, now Amalek came and fought with Israel and Rephidim. And I'm like, that's kind of like life. I was talking to a friend the other day. I said, how's it going? He'd been through a bunch of stuff. He said, oh, you know. All right, here we go. Life just keeps coming at you. Well, duh. Anybody, life's not coming at you every day? Yeah, I mean, this isn't Groundhog Day, you know, the movie with Bill Murray. We're not repeating the same day every day. Everything's a new day, new challenges. It's new good, new bad, what have you. And now it's like, in the midst of all this we're going through, here comes Amalek to fight us. And Moses said to Joshua, choose us some men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. And so Joshua did as Moses said. Now, I've pastored long enough that you might not see this, but my weird way of thinking sees, so okay, Moses, you're the leader, and you're telling me to get some guys and go out and fight those guys, and you're going up on a mountain behind us? How about I go with you? Sounds a little safer. But that's what we recognize. I told the first crowd, we would pray for our kids before they go to school when they're young especially. And we'd circle together at the front door as they go out to get the bus or whatever was involved. And one of our children, I forget which one morning was praying for Mommy and Daddy. And they said, bless Mommy as she goes to work and da-da-da-da-da. And bless Daddy as he goes and does whatever Daddy does. I mean, your own children don't even, what do you do all day long? And it's hard to describe because no day replicates itself. It's not measured by how long you sit at a desk in an office. It's not measured by how many programs you can get. It's a lifestyle that is available and adjusts to the needs of the moment. And trust me, even retired, I get constant text and phone call. I'm not complaining, but folks reaching out. And I think Dale's discovered a little bit. He says, I appreciate pastors more now because Brother Ed's like me. We came from some weird mold of school that we thought we had to do everything. It's kind of like we're going to do the high dive and you hold up the scorecards. Ignorant, wrong, but we didn't know any better. That's the way we were trained. So we'd run around like chickens with our head off, covering everything, terrible delegators, but at the same time recognizing you can't delegate anything unless you have people to delegate it to. And that's where you come in. How do you support? How do you serve? You get the lead from the leaders and you move forward. And so Joshua went out and fought, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up. And when Moses held up his hand, verse 11, Israel prevailed, and when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. So it wasn't he was a distant, spectator. He was intimately involved in the battle. Because everything that happens physically, especially in the work of God, has a spiritual dimension to it. And I want to tell you that spiritual dimension is the key to the real victory. And as a result, when his hands were up, Israel prevailed. When they dropped, because it says in verse 12, Moses' hands became heavy. When Brother Ed and I used to get together and compare notes and try to encourage one, we had a game where we would try to say the other one was worse than I say, Brother Ed, you're a lot worse about that than me. He said, oh, no, brother, you make me feel better because I've met somebody that's worse than me. Because we knew that we were out of balance most of the time. And so we had a lot of fun with it, but there's a lot of truth in it. And so Moses' hands became heavy. And they took a stone and put it under him and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported, I love that word, supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. Pastors are not supermen. I saw when I went to get some coffee this morning, is Jill here working way ahead of me, working here. And on a T-shirt was, I'm a school bus driver, something about what is your hero role? And, we're in a time now that we're looking at people being heroes in different roles. I'm not making fun. I just saw that and I thought, I'm a pastor now. Or was, but we're not superhuman. And as a result, they grew weary, and it looks innocuous. It looks so insignificant, and in some ways kind of humiliating. They're just holding his arms up. But in holding his arms up, the support provided that spiritual connection there that the power of God flowed through. And when those hands were up, the enemy was defeated, and they were able. So in verse 13, Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, write this for a memorial in the book. So I looked at this, and I thought today, this is my charge to the church. Everything I've said, and I won't repeat it, and you say amen, is to bring us to awareness. In this moment, we're in a transition, of course, and under new leadership, there are going to be times, there's going to be change, there's going to be challenges, but there are always choices of attitude and action of recognizing this is a new day and a new. This doesn't disrespect who served here, what's been accomplished here, but it is a part of moving along in the journey to where God wants us to be and how He wants us to serve. You know, I put that little graphic, and we'll have Brother Scott come here in a moment for the last part of our service that I think is the real foundation and key to it, of Errol Flynn leading that charge. And, you know, it's something in my makeup as a child. I loved movies like that. And, you know, I don't pretend to be some military hero, you know, that I tell my family I'd take a bullet for any one of you. I think they're halfway convinced I mean it. But, you know, the idea, I told a pastor friend, there's several of us about the same age, and within a period of a year, 3 of my friends retired from the ministries they were doing as I was, and Brother Ed being one. And it's everybody, what are you going to do now? I said, I don't know. God opens doors and we go through them. I'd have never imagined this tenure here with you. I reluctantly committed to Brother Ed's church for 3 months. And I don't mean that condescendingly. I just didn't know. And it's grown into 8. And I tell everybody, my son, Dad, I thought you retired. I said, son, I've never retired from serving God. We never do. It's just a different chapter. And I want to tell you folks once again, as I kind of close out this chapter, and I'll still be around to help any way I can. I told Brother Alves yesterday as we met, I said, anyway, I says, I'll be a Moses, a her, a Joshua, but you're Moses, and you're the man. And I'll tell you, I shouldn't, when I first came to Indiana, Brother Ed was a big part of me coming here. I teased him that he flat out lied to me, the church I was taking. It was a great opportunity. Later on, he said, well, brother, I was only there one time. I said, oh, my. In fact, I had members tell me when we voted to bring you as pastor, we thought we were voting to close the church. It was that bad. And they asked me, do you think you can lead us out of this to growth? And I said, I believe God can. But my concern was, if I lead differently than you ever have, are you going to be, oh, absolutely. We began to grow, people getting saved, baptized, and all of a sudden, I understand, well, he doesn't do it like Pastor so. He's not so-and-so. He da-da-da-da-da-da. But you know what? Stay with it. Stay with the stuff. I had a pastor approach me after a fellowship meeting and said, you know Ed Moore? I said, yeah, I kind of played a little dumb with him. I didn't tell him all. I said, yeah. He said, I tell you, I'm just concerned about him. That church has been such and such and such. I think he's doing some new. So it don't start with here today. It started with him. And he just began to well, Brother Ed, and I don't know if I ever told Ed that, but I turned to him, and I'm a little bit of Alabama redneck. And I didn't hit him. I was spiritual about him, but I said, I am shocked that as a pastor yourself, you're sitting here breaking another pastor over the coals. I happen to love Brother Ed Moore. I agree with everything he's doing. And if you don't apologize right now, before I have a moment with you that I'll regret later, I'm getting out of the car. His eyes got that big, and I got out of the car. I looked back in, and he still just looking at me. And I said, adios. We never had another conversation. And I'll tell you right now, when I first came here, I said, don't come to me about Brother Ed. I'd fight a buzzsaw for him. And I tell you right now, that's my commitment to this man here. I got you back, and I mean it sincerely. And any way I can help, I want to be here. And I just thank you guys. You've made this a very positive experience for us. You've encouraged us in a wonderful way. And, you know, I'll never make a Calvary charge on a movie set like Errol Flynn or John Wayne or whoever. But I told my friends, I said, I want to die in full charge mode with whoever I'm working with and serving, swords drawn, flag flapping in the breeze, full gallop, with my boots still on, and go out that way. And they just like, oh boy, you always been so dramatic. But I remind them, there is going to be a Calvary charge someday. Amen? Read the book of Revelation chapter 19. And when we gather together with him, there's going to be a day that our Commander-in-Chief, Jesus Christ, is going to tell all of us, mount up. Enough of this. And we're going to mount up with him and charge out of heaven, and he's going to make every wrong right. He's going to turn every evil into a righteous thing. Justice is going to prevail. We're going to be triumphant. And folks, I want to encourage you, be in that charge with this man, this church, your leaders, all the way. And one day we'll just all gather together, mount up, and charge out of heaven and see Jesus win the day. Brother Scott?
You know what? Let's not wait. Let's start that charge right now. Amen. You know, Pastor Rick said something he said a few weeks ago, and I was actually going to use it, and you stole it first, but I'm going to use it anyway.